Clint Eastwood's appearance on Jimmy Kimmel erupts into chaos as a fiery clash over politics explodes. The legendary actor defends Trump against Kimmel's wild accusations, leading to a tense showdown that ends with Eastwood storming off stage. The studio lights burned bright as Jimmy Kimmel leaned forward, his signature smirk plastered across his face, ready to dive into another night of Jimmy Kimmel Live. The audience buzzed with anticipation. Tonight's guest was none other than Clint Eastwood, the 94-year-old icon whose storied career spanned decades, from gritty westerns to Oscar-winning dramas. He was there to promote his latest film, a somber reflection on American resilience, but the air crackled with an unspoken tension. Eastwood, known for his steely gaze and no-nonsense attitude, wasn't one for the usual late-night fluff. Kimmel, ever the provocateur, seemed oblivious to the storm brewing across from him. "Thanks for being here, Clint," Kimmel began, his tone light but edged with that familiar playful jab. "You're looking good for, what, 150 years old now?" The audience chuckled, but Eastwood's expression barely shifted, his eyes narrowing slightly. He nodded, his voice low and deliberate. "I'm here to talk about the movie, Jimmy. Let's keep it there." The crowd tittered, sensing the undercurrent, but Kimmel pressed on, undeterred. "Oh, we'll get to the movie, but first I gotta ask, how's it feel to still be making films when most guys your age are, napping through Jeopardy?" Eastwood leaned back, his fingers tapping the armrest. "I make films because I've got something to say," he said, his voice steady but firm. "This one's about people pulling themselves up, about America finding its spine again. You might not get that, Jimmy, with all your jokes." The audience let out a mix of gasps and nervous laughs. Kimmel's smile faltered for a split second, but he recovered, sensing an opportunity to dig deeper. "Oh, I get it, Clint. Sounds like a love letter to the good old days. Maybe a nod to your pal Trump's 'Make America Great Again' shtick?" The crowd roared, some cheering, others murmuring uncomfortably. Eastwood's jaw tightened, and the room seemed to shrink under the weight of his stare. "You want to go there, Jimmy?" he said, his voice like gravel. "I'm game, but let's talk straight. You've been taking shots at Trump for years, calling him every name in the book. Transphobic, racist, you name it. You ever stop to think maybe you're the one stirring the pot?" The audience fell silent, the air thick with shock. Kimmel blinked, caught off guard, but he leaned into it, his tone sharpening. "Come on, Clint. The guy's said plenty to earn those labels. You're really going to defend him?" "I'm not here to defend anyone," Eastwood shot back, his voice rising just enough to command the room. "I'm saying you're cherry-picking, sound bites to make a caricature. Trump's trying to steer this country back on course, get people working, secure the borders. You might not like his style, but don't act like he's the devil incarnate. You're smarter than that, or at least I thought you were." The crowd erupted, some clapping, others booing, as Kimmel's face flushed. He opened his mouth to respond, but Eastwood wasn't done. "You mock him. You mock half the country who voted for him. You ever think about that, Jimmy? Or is it just easier to play to this room?" Kimmel, visibly rattled, tried to pivot. "All right, Clint, let's cool it down. How about we talk about the movie? Tell us about this big scene with—" But Eastwood cut him off, his voice slicing through the attempt at levity. "No, you brought it up. Let's finish it. You called him transphobic. Where's the proof? You got a quote, or is it just your writers feeding you lines?" The audience gasped again, the tension now palpable. Kimmel's smirk was gone, replaced by a strained grin. "Clint, I'm just saying what's out there. The guy's policies, his comments on certain groups—" "Certain groups," Eastwood interjected, leaning forward. "You mean the ones you decide are victims? You don't get to rewrite history because it fits your monologue. Trump's done more for jobs, for minorities, than you give him credit for. You want to talk facts? I'm ready. You want to sling mud? I'm not playing." The crowd was on edge, some shouting support, others heckling. Kimmel, sensing the segment slipping, tried to laugh it off. "Okay, Clint, you're fired up. Let's take a breather, maybe talk about your westerns." But Eastwood wasn't having it. The room hung on his next move, the clash teetering, on the edge of something unforgettable. The studio air was electric, every eye locked on Clint Eastwood as he sat, unyielding, his stare boring into Jimmy Kimmel. The host's attempt to pivot to safer ground had crashed and burned, and now the room pulsed with the raw energy of a confrontation no one saw coming. Kimmel, his usual charm fraying, forced a chuckle, but it sounded hollow. "All right, Clint, you're bringing the heat tonight," he said, his voice tight. "But let's not get stuck in the political mud. Your movie's got some heavy themes. Why don't we—" "You don't get it, do you?" Eastwood interrupted, his voice low but cutting like a blade. "I came here to talk about something real, something that matters. You keep trying to turn this into a circus. You think that's clever?" The audience let out a collective gasp, some clapping, others shifting uncomfortably. Kimmel's face twitched, his composure slipping further. "A circus? Come on, Clint, this is a talk show. We have fun here. You knew that coming in." "Fun?" Eastwood leaned forward, his weathered hands gripping the chair. "You call dragging people's names through the dirt fun? You've been hammering Trump for years, painting him as some cartoon villain. Racist, transphobic. Your words. I'm asking you, Jimmy, right now, give me one solid piece of evidence. Not hearsay, not spin. Facts." The crowd roared, a mix of cheers and boos as the tension ratcheted up. Kimmel, now visibly flustered, spread his hands. "Clint, it's not about one quote. It's the pattern, his policies, his rhetoric. You're telling me you buy his whole Save America act?" Eastwood's eyes flashed. "I'm saying you're lazy. You lean on labels instead of doing the work. Trump's pushed for jobs, cut taxes, brought manufacturing back. Black unemployment hit historic lows under him. You ever mention that in your monologues? Or does that not fit the script?" The audience erupted again, some shouting approval, others heckling. Kimmel, his face reddening, tried to regain control. "Okay, Clint, you're cherry-picking stats. What about the travel ban? What about his comments on gender issues? You're gonna sit there and tell me that's not divisive?" "Divisive?" Eastwood shot back, his voice rising. "You want to talk divisive? Look in the mirror. You've spent years mocking anyone who doesn't think like you. Trump's trying to fix a country that's been bleeding out. Secure borders, protect jobs. You call that racist because it's easier than arguing the point. You're not informing people, Jimmy. You're preaching." The crowd was a powder keg now, some chanting "Clint," while others booed. Kimmel, his smile gone, leaned forward, his tone sharp. "Preaching? I'm calling it like I see it. Trump's rhetoric fuels hate. You can't deny that." "I can and I will," Eastwood said, his voice steady but laced with steel. "You say he fuels hate, but you're the one with a platform, night after night, tearing into him, his voters, anyone who dares disagree with you. You think that's uniting people? You're not a comedian, Jimmy. You're a bully with a microphone." The audience exploded, the noise deafening. Kimmel's jaw dropped, his eyes wide, as he scrambled for a response. "A bully? Clint, that's rich. I'm just holding people accountable." "Accountable?" Eastwood's voice boomed now, silencing the room. "You don't hold anyone accountable. You pick targets, you mock, you move on. I've watched you tear into Trump, his family, his supporters, like it's a game. You ever think about the people watching, the ones you're calling deplorable? They're not laughing, Jimmy. They're done with you." The crowd was on its feet, some cheering wildly, others shouting in protest. Kimmel, his face a mask of shock, tried to cut in. "Clint, you're making this personal. Let's—" "It is personal," Eastwood snapped, standing now, his towering presence dominating the stage. You've made it personal for years, mocking people like me, like them, he gestured to the audience, because we see the world different. I'm done with it. He ripped off his mic, the feedback screeching through the studio, and stormed off stage, leaving Kimmel frozen, the crowd in chaos, and the cameras rolling on a moment that would break the internet. The studio was a furnace of noise as Clint Eastwood's exit left a void on stage, the screech of his discarded mic still echoing. Jimmy Kimmel sat, stunned, his face a mix of shock and barely concealed fury as the audience roared, some cheering Eastwood's defiance, others hurling boos at the empty spot where he'd stood. The cameras, relentless, captured every second of the chaos, the red lights blinking like vultures circling a kill. Kimmel's hands gripped the desk, his knuckles white, as he tried to process the verbal gut punch Eastwood had delivered. The crowd's energy was a living thing, feeding off the raw confrontation that had just unfolded, and Kimmel knew he had to reclaim the room or lose it entirely. He forced a laugh, shaky at first, and leaned into the mic. "Well, folks, that's one way to make an exit, huh?" The audience responded with a mix of cheers and jeers, but the tension hadn't broken. It had only shifted. Kimmel's eyes darted to the side, where his producers were frantically signaling from offstage, urging him to pivot. "Guess Clint's not a fan of late-night banter," he said, his tone sharper now, trying to claw back control. "But let's be real. When you're defending a guy like Trump, maybe you're not here for laughs." The crowd split again, some clapping, others shouting in protest, and Kimmel seized the moment, his confidence creeping back. "I mean, come on. The guy's got a point about jobs, sure. But let's not pretend Trump's some saint steering the country to glory." The words hung in the air, and the audience's reaction was a jagged mix of approval and dissent. Kimmel, sensing he'd struck a nerve, doubled down. "Eastwood wants facts? Okay, how about Trump's record on divisive rhetoric? The man's built a career on it. You don't get to dodge that by yelling about jobs." The crowd roared, but the energy was different now, less chaotic, more polarized. Kimmel was steering the room back to his turf, but the ghost of Eastwood's words lingered. Off stage, the crew scrambled, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the fire burn. Kimmel, his smirk returning, leaned back. "Look, I respect Clint. Legend, no question. But if you're gonna come on my show and call me a bully, you better bring more than tough guy stares." The audience laughed, but it was uneasy, and Kimmel's jab felt like a cheap shot to some. The cameras caught a few spectators shaking, their heads, their murmurs rippling through the studio. Kimmel pressed on, trying to lighten the mood. "Anyway, let's talk about something less explosive. Who saw Clint's new movie? Sounds intense, right?" But the pivot was clumsy, and the crowd wasn't ready to let go of the clash. A voice shouted from the back, "You didn't answer him!" And the room erupted again, laughter mixing with cheers. Kimmel's face tightened, his eyes scanning the audience for the heckler. "Oh, I answered plenty," he shot back, his voice edged with irritation. "Maybe Clint didn't like the truth." The dig landed, but it also ignited a new wave of shouts, some chanting "Clint" in defiance. Kimmel's producers were visibly panicking now, one waving frantically to wrap the segment, but Kimmel wasn't done. All right, let's calm down," he said, raising his hands, his smile strained. "Here's the deal. I call it like I see it. Trump's policies, his words, they divide people. That's not me preaching. That's reality. Clint wants to defend him, fine, but don't come at me like I'm the bad guy for pointing it out." The audience was split down the middle, half clapping, half grumbling, and Kimmel leaned into the divide, his voice rising. "This is my show, and I'm not going to sugarcoat the truth to make anyone feel better." The crowd's reaction was deafening, a cacophony of cheers, boos, and scattered chants. Kimmel, riding the wave, seemed to regain his footing, but the room felt like a tinderbox. Offstage, whispers spread among the crew. Eastwood's team was still in the building, and word was he hadn't left. The possibility of his return hung like a storm cloud, and Kimmel's next move would either douse the flames or set the whole place ablaze. The Jimmy Kimmel Live studio was a cauldron of noise, the audience's cheers and boos crashing like waves as Jimmy Kimmel leaned into his desk, his smirk masking the sweat beading on his brow. He'd clawed back some control after Clint Eastwood's explosive exit, but the air was still charged, the crowd divided and restless. Whispers of Eastwood's team lingering backstage fueled the tension, and every eye darted toward the wings, half expecting the legend to storm back. Kimmel, sensing the moment slipping, raised his voice over the din. "All right, folks, let's keep this moving," he said, his tone forceful but frayed. "We've had some fireworks tonight, but that's what makes this show real, right? No. Script's just truth." The crowd roared, some clapping, others shouting, "Bring Clint back!" Kimmel's eyes flicked to his producers, who were gesturing wildly to wrap it up, but he wasn't ready to let go. "Look, I get it. Clint's a legend, and he's got his views," he said, his voice sharp. "But when you come on my stage and call me a bully for calling out Trump's divisive nonsense, you're picking a fight you can't win." The audience split again, half cheering, half jeering, and Kimmel leaned into it, his confidence surging. "Trump's rhetoric tears people apart. I'm not the bad guy for saying that. I'm just the guy with the mic." The line landed with a mix of laughs and boos, but the room's energy shifted. Kimmel was rallying his base. Then, a low murmur rippled through the crowd, growing louder as heads turned toward the stage's edge. Eastwood's unmistakable silhouette emerged from the shadows, mic in hand, his steely gaze fixed on Kimmel. The audience erupted, a deafening mix of cheers and gasps, as he stepped back into the light. Kimmel's face froze, his smirk vanishing. "Clint, you're back," he said, his voice tight, trying to play it cool. "Thought you were done." Eastwood didn't sit. He stood, towering, his voice steady but laced with fire. "I was done, Jimmy. But I heard you out here, still slinging mud, still playing the victim. So let's finish this." The crowd went wild, some chanting, "Clint!" as Kimmel shifted in his seat, his hands clenching. "Finish what, Clint? You walked off." "That's on you," he shot back, but his bravado was thinning. Eastwood shook his head, his eyes never leaving Kimmel's. "You're wrong, and you know it. You say Trump divides? You've been dividing this country every night, mocking half the people watching, calling them names, laughing at their values. You don't get to hide behind it's just comedy." The audience was a frenzy now, some on their feet, others shouting over each other. Kimmel, his face flushed, leaned forward. "I'm not hiding, Clint. I'm calling out a guy whose policies hurt people. You can't rewrite that with your tough guy act." "Act?" Eastwood's voice boomed, silencing the room. "I've spent my life telling stories about real people, real struggles. You? You tell jokes for claps? You say Trump hurts people? Show me the proof. Not your feelings, not your writer's lines. Facts." Kimmel opened his mouth, but Eastwood cut him off. "You can't, because it's easier to smear than to think. I'm not here for Trump. I'm here for the people you've written off, the ones you mock while they're working to keep this country running." The crowd was electric, some cheering wildly, others stunned into silence. Kimmel, cornered, tried to pivot. "Clint, this is a talk show, not a debate stage. Let's—" But Eastwood wasn't having it. "No, Jimmy, you made this a fight. Now own it." He turned to the audience, his voice steady. "You folks deserve better than this. You're not pawns in his game, remember that." With that, he dropped the mic, its thud reverberating through the studio, and walked off for good, the crowd exploding in a mix of awe and chaos. Kimmel sat, speechless, as the cameras rolled. He tried to laugh it off, muttering, "Well, that's showbiz," but the words fell flat. The segment cut to black, and within hours the clash was everywhere. X, YouTube, news feeds. Eastwood's stand hailed as a takedown of Kimmel's sanctimony. The legend had come, spoken his truth, and left Kimmel to face a divided audience and a viral firestorm that wouldn't fade.